I spent 23 years hiding people from danger, but Rachel Whitmore was the first woman I ever had to hide from myself. 6 weeks after I met her, I stood across the street from a small white house in Vermont with no badge on my belt and no professional reason left to knock on her door. Through the front window, I could see her moving beneath the warm kitchen light, alive, safe, and no longer mine to protect. I remember thinking that should have made everything easier. It did not. To understand why I was standing there, afraid of a woman who had never threatened me, you have to go back to the afternoon Rachel became someone else. It was raining when they brought her to me. Not dramatic rain. Just a cold November drizzle that turned the parking lot outside the federal building silver. I was 52 years old, divorced, and good enough at my job that people had stopped asking whether I could handle difficult assignments. Rachel sat across from me in a borrowed gray coat, both hands wrapped around a paper cup she had not touched. She was 43, with tired eyes and the controlled expression of someone determined not to let strangers watch her fall apart. A folder rested between us. Inside it was the new life we had prepared for her. New identification. New address. New history. New name. Emily Carter, I said. Rachel stared at the identification card for several seconds. She sounds boring. I looked at her. That is the idea. Does Emily Carter have terrible credit? Excellent credit. Then I already resent her. I should not have smiled. I did anyway. It lasted perhaps half a second, but Rachel noticed. That was the first thing I learned about her. She noticed everything. I pushed the folder toward her. From this point forward, you follow the rules I give you. No personal calls. No social media. No contacting anyone from your previous life unless we approve it. If something feels wrong, you tell me. Her expression changed at previous life. Only slightly. You make it sound like I died. I am trying to make sure you do not disappear from the life you still have. She looked toward the rain sliding down the window. 3 days earlier, Rachel had been a forensic accountant with a townhouse, co-workers, neighbors, and a name she had used for 43 years. Now every familiar thing had become something she could not safely reach for. I had seen that loss before. I knew better than to offer comfort I could not guarantee. What am I supposed to call myself now? She asked. I tapped the identification card. Emily. Rachel looked back at me. I meant when nobody is listening. For once I had no procedural answer. And that should have warned me. Because the first boundary Rachel crossed was not physical, romantic, or even intentional. She simply asked me a question my training had never taught me how to answer. And somehow, before we ever reached the safe house, I had already begun wondering who Rachel Whitmore would become when nobody was listening. The safe house was 4 hours north, in a Vermont town small enough that strangers were noticed and polite enough that nobody admitted noticing them. Rachel watched the landscape change through the passenger window while I drove. Cities became towns. Towns became stretches of dark highway bordered by bare trees and old snow. For the first hour she barely spoke. Then she asked, "Do you always drive like this?" "Like what?" "Like the speed limit personally offended you." I checked the dashboard. I am 3 miles per hour under it. Exactly. I almost smiled again. That bothered me more than it should have. My job depended on distance. People in my protection were assignments. Their fear mattered. Their safety mattered. Their opinions about my driving did not. Rachel was already making those categories feel less stable. The house sat at the end of a narrow road, half a mile from the nearest neighbor, with a porch, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen designed sometime during an era when Americans apparently believed brown cabinets improved morale. Rachel stood inside the doorway and surveyed it. Emily Carter lives here? For now. Emily needs better taste. Emily needs curtains that close properly. That ended the joke. I checked every window, every lock, every exterior light. Rachel followed me until I finally turned around. You do not have to supervise me supervising the house. I have nothing else to do. The humor had vanished from her voice. That was when I understood what relocation actually looked like from her side. I had brought 1 suitcase. Rachel had brought everything she was allowed to keep inside 2 bags. There is food in the refrigerator, I said. Basic things. How long are you staying? Until the transition team takes over. Which means several days. Maybe longer. Something in her shoulders loosened. It was subtle, but I saw it. I wished I had not. That evening, snow began falling. Rachel made grilled cheese because it was apparently the only meal she trusted herself not to ruin. I sat at the kitchen table reviewing procedures while she opened cabinets searching for tomato soup. "You know," she said, "for someone protecting my life, you are remarkably bad company. Good company is not in my job description." "What is?" "Keeping you safe." She found the soup and held up the can triumphantly. "Then congratulations. I feel extremely protected from starvation." Later, I found her standing beside the living room window, staring at the snow. "You need to stay back from the glass," I said. She stepped away immediately, but her expression hardened. "Right. Rules. Rachel." She looked at me. It was the first time I had used her real name since leaving Washington. The room seemed to notice before either of us did. Her face softened. "Say it again." I should have refused. Instead I said quietly, "Rachel." She closed her eyes for 1 second, as if hearing her own name had returned something the day had taken from her. When she opened them, she whispered, "Thank you." And standing there in that borrowed house, I realized safety was not the only thing she was in danger of losing. By the third morning, Rachel had learned exactly how I took my coffee, and I had learned that this was somehow more dangerous than anything in her case file. I came into the kitchen at 6:15 and found a mug waiting beside my chair. Black coffee. No sugar. She stood at the counter wearing jeans and a navy sweater, spreading strawberry jam across toast as though borrowed identities and locked doors were ordinary parts of breakfast. "You are staring," she said. "I am assessing." "Is that what professionals call staring?" I picked up the mug. "How did you know?" "Yesterday you made coffee twice. Both times black." She shrugged. "I notice things too." That answer stayed with me. For years, I had survived professionally by noticing what other people missed. Rachel had turned the habit back on me. Forced proximity accelerated things that ordinary life allowed people to hide. Within days, I knew she hated silence while cooking, read mystery novels from the ending backward, and slept badly whenever the wind rattled the windows. She learned that I checked the locks before bed, folded newspapers precisely in half, and pretended not to like the old soul records she found in the house. "You know every word," she accused one evening. "Knowing something is not the same as liking it. That may be the saddest sentence you have ever said." I laughed before I could stop myself. Rachel went quiet. Not frightened. Surprised. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." "Rachel." Her smile became smaller. "I have never heard you laugh." The room changed. I looked away first. The next afternoon, we drove into town because remaining invisible sometimes meant behaving normally. Rachel needed groceries and a warmer coat. Inside a small general store, the cashier smiled at us and asked whether we were new to the area. "Just passing through," I answered. Rachel slipped effortlessly into being Emily, mentioning a temporary rental and remote work. I watched the transformation happen in seconds. Outside, she became silent. "You did well," I said once we reached the car. "That is supposed to make me feel better? It means you are adapting." She looked at the store through the windshield. "I lied about my favorite cereal." I frowned. "What?" She asked whether I liked that maple granola. "Emily apparently loves it." Rachel gave a humorless laugh. "It is ridiculous. Of everything I have lost, why does lying about breakfast make me want to cry?" I had no procedure for that either, so I stopped trying to sound like an officer. Because the small things are usually where we keep ourselves. Rachel turned toward me. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. "And where do you keep yourself, Claire?" Hearing my first name from her felt unexpectedly intimate. I should have corrected her. Instead, I sat there while snow melted across the windshield and realized I did not know the answer. That night, an update came from Washington. The transition team would be delayed. I would remain with Rachel another week. I read the message twice. The troubling part was not that I minded. It was the quiet relief I felt because I did not. For the next 4 days, I told myself the extra time changed nothing. Then Rachel started leaving a second mug beside mine before I even entered the kitchen, and I began measuring mornings by whether she was already awake. That was the problem with routines. They could disguise attachment as convenience. I still checked every lock. I still reviewed every update from Washington, but somewhere between security calls and grocery lists, the safe house stopped feeling like an assignment. One evening, snow covered the road so completely that the world beyond the windows seemed erased. Rachel sat cross-legged on the living room floor sorting through a box of old records she had found in a cabinet. "Claire, this place has Motown. The house has Motown. You are correcting ownership because you are excited." "I am not excited." She held up a record and smiled. "Your face disagrees." 20 minutes later, music filled the room at a volume I considered unnecessary. Rachel danced badly while making pasta. I stood near the stove pretending to inspect the sauce. "You are judging me," she said. "Professionally. Your profession does not include dancing. Neither does yours, apparently." She laughed and I felt that dangerous warmth again. Later after dinner the power flickered once. Rachel froze. It lasted less than a second, but I saw her hand tighten around her glass. "Just the weather," I said. "I know." She did not sound convinced. I checked the house anyway. When I returned, she was sitting on the couch with her arms folded tightly. "Everything is fine. You say that like you can guarantee it." I stopped. "I cannot guarantee everything." Rachel looked at me then. "That might be the first completely honest thing you have said to me." I sat in the chair opposite her. "You think I lied to you?" "No. I think you hide inside certainty." The words landed harder than they should have. "You barely know me." "Neither do you." "I know enough to keep you safe." "That is not what I meant." Silence settled between us. She looked toward the dark window, then spoke more softly. "My former husband used to tell me I worried too much. When I found the financial records that started all of this, I almost ignored them because I had spent years being told my instincts were inconvenient." It was the first time she had mentioned her marriage. "How long were you married?" I asked. 14 years. She glanced at me. "And you?" "Divorced. 9 years ago." "Do you miss him?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Rachel noticed. "Of course she did." "Do you miss anyone?" I opened my mouth but nothing useful came out. She gave me a sad little smile. "That is what I thought." Then my secure phone vibrated. I read the message once, then again. A routine transfer had been canceled. Someone outside our immediate team had requested information about Rachel's relocation schedule. No address had been exposed, but the request should never have happened. Rachel watched my face change. "Claire." I locked the screen. Until that moment, the house had begun to feel almost normal. Suddenly every curtain, every window, every mile of empty road mattered again. "Pack a bag," I said. Rachel stood. "Are we leaving?" I looked at her and understood that the answer I gave next would change more than our location. "Yes. And this time, nobody gets told where I am taking you." We left 12 minutes later with 2 bags, 2 travel mugs, and none of the ordinary goodbye rituals people use when they expect to return. I drove west through falling snow while Rachel watched the road behind us in the side mirror. She did not ask where we were going until nearly an hour had passed. "Do you actually have a destination?" "Yes." "Are you going to tell me?" "Not yet." "That is comforting." "It is supposed to be safe, not comforting." She turned toward the window. "You know those things do not have to be opposites." I had no answer for that. By midnight, we reached a small cabin outside a town near the New York border. It belonged to a retired colleague whose name had never appeared anywhere in Rachel's file. The place was modest, warm, and surrounded by enough open land that approaching headlights could be seen from a long distance away. Rachel stepped inside and looked around. 1 bedroom. I set my bag beside the couch. "You take it." "And you." "Couch." "You are 52, Claire." "Thank you for the update." "Your back will file a complaint." Despite everything, I laughed. Rachel smiled, and for 3 seconds the fear loosened its grip on the room. Then she noticed I was still holding my secure phone. "You think someone inside your office made that request?" It was not a question. "I think information moved somewhere it should not have." "That sounds like the careful version." "It is the only version I can prove." Rachel folded her arms. "And until you can prove more, we stay here?" "Yes. Together." The word carried more weight than it should have. "For your protection." Her eyes stayed on mine. "Of course." The next morning, Washington confirmed the request had come through valid credentials belonging to a supervisor who claimed he had never made it. It could have been an administrative error. It could have been compromised access. Until investigators knew which, Rachel could not be moved through normal channels. I should have hated the uncertainty. Instead, what frightened me was how quickly the cabin developed its own rhythm. Rachel cooked eggs. I made coffee. She complained that I folded dish towels like evidence bags. I told her she used too many pans. By evening, she was reading at one end of the couch while I worked at the other, our shoulders separated by less than a foot. The closeness felt ordinary until I noticed it felt ordinary. Rachel closed her book. Can I ask you something? You usually do. Why did you become this person? What person? The woman who always knows where the exits are. I looked toward the window. After my divorce, work became easier than going home. She waited. I surprised myself by continuing. My marriage did not end because of betrayal. We simply became two people performing a life neither of us wanted anymore. Did you love him? Once. Rachel's voice softened. Have you loved anyone since? I looked at her. The question should have been easy. It was not. Before I could answer, she reached for her mug at the same moment I did. Our hands touched. Neither of us moved immediately. Rachel's eyes lifted to mine, and something quiet changed between us. Then I pulled my hand away. You should get some sleep. Her expression closed by one careful degree. Right. Protection first. She walked toward the bedroom, then stopped at the doorway. Claire, someday you are going to have to decide whether keeping everyone at a safe distance is actually keeping you safe. The door closed softly behind her. I remained on the couch, staring at the untouched mug between us, already knowing the distance I had just created felt far more dangerous than the closeness I was trying to prevent. I slept badly after that, although slept was a generous word for what happened on the couch. Rachel's question followed me through the dark cabin. Had I loved anyone since my divorce? By morning, I had constructed 6 reasonable explanations for why I could not answer her, and none survived the sight of her walking into the kitchen. She had tied her hair back loosely, and was wearing the same navy sweater from Vermont. Coffee? She asked. Please. No joke. No smile. The distance I had created the night before was still there, polite and unmistakable. I discovered I hated it. My secure phone rang before breakfast. Washington had found the problem. The supervisor's credentials had been copied during an earlier systems breach, and the relocation request had triggered an internal alert before any protected address was released. More importantly, the investigation had confirmed Rachel's current location remained secure. So we can go back? Rachel asked after I explained. Not yet. They want us here until they finish reviewing the transfer chain. How long? 2 or 3 days. She nodded and returned to her coffee. I should have felt relief. Instead, I heard the clock start ticking. 2 or 3 days. Then another team would arrive. Rachel would become Emily permanently, and I would become someone she used to know. That afternoon, we walked along the edge of the property because Rachel was restless and I was tired of pretending the cabin walls were not closing around me. Snow softened the fields beneath a pale sky. When this is over, she said, do witnesses ever see you again? Usually not. Usually. There are rules. Rachel gave me a sideways look. There are always rules with you. Rules are useful. So are windows. That does not mean you should live behind one. I stopped walking. What exactly do you want from me, Rachel? She stopped too. For the first time, she looked genuinely angry, though her voice remained quiet. Honesty. I have been honest. No. You have been accurate. That is different. The distinction left me defenseless. Rachel looked across the white field. I am losing my name, my home, my career, people I cared about, even stupid things like knowing which grocery store carries the coffee I like. And somehow in the middle of all that I started trusting you. She faced me again. Then last night you looked at me like trusting me back would be some kind of professional failure. Rachel, I am responsible for you. I know. That matters. I know that too. Her eyes softened, making everything worse. But I am not asking you to stop protecting me. I am asking you to stop pretending you feel nothing while you do it. The world seemed unnaturally quiet. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I heard myself say, I do not know what I feel. Rachel held my gaze. That is the first answer, I believe. We walked back separately, several steps between us. Near sunset, another message arrived. Rachel's transfer had been approved for 48 hours from then. A permanent protection team would take over. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Rachel read my expression before I spoke. They are coming for me. Friday morning. She nodded slowly. Then I guess we know how much time is left. She went into the bedroom and closed the door. I remained alone in the kitchen, looking at the second coffee mug beside mine. And for the first time in 23 years, the end of an assignment felt exactly like losing someone. Friday morning became a deadline neither of us knew how to discuss, so on Thursday we behaved almost normally. Rachel made pancakes from a box she found behind the flour. I told her they were uneven. She told me my personality was uneven. I drank my coffee and watched her smile, knowing that by the same hour tomorrow another officer would be sitting across from her. The thought embarrassed me with its sharpness. After breakfast, Rachel began packing. There was very little to pack, which somehow made it worse. 2 sweaters, jeans, toiletries, the mystery novel she had finished backward. She folded everything on the bed while I stood in the doorway. You are doing it again, she said. Doing what? Watching me like you are trying to memorize something. I looked away. Occupational habit. Claire. One word. No accusation. I was suddenly tired of hiding behind answers that sounded reasonable. I am trying to memorize you. Her hand stopped over a sweater. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. Come here. I hesitated before sitting beside her, leaving careful space between us. Rachel looked at that space and almost smiled. You really are committed to making everything difficult. I have been told. Mostly by me. Recently, yes. Her smile disappeared. Tomorrow I become someone you are not allowed to know. You are still Rachel. To you maybe. The words hurt because I understood them. She had spent weeks being instructed to abandon pieces of herself, while I had been quietly becoming one of the few people who still knew where those pieces belonged. You asked whether I had loved anyone since my divorce, I said. Rachel waited. I could not answer because I spent years making sure the question never mattered. And now? I looked at her hands. Now it matters. Rachel inhaled slowly. Because of me? There it was. The question I had been avoiding since her fingers touched mine over a coffee mug. I could have hidden behind professional ethics, terrible timing, or the fact that Rachel's entire life was changing. All of those things were true. None answered her. Yes. Her eyes filled with something gentler than relief. Claire, I need you to understand something. I do not want gratitude confused with affection. You protected me when I was frightened. That can make feelings complicated. Even then, she was protecting both of us from an easy answer. I know. And you are still responsible for me until tomorrow. I know that too. So what do we do with this? I finally looked at her. Nothing. Not while you are under my protection. Rachel nodded, but disappointment crossed her face before she could hide it. I wanted to reach for her. I did not. Instead I said, but doing nothing does not mean feeling nothing. She looked at me for a long moment. That might be the most romantic sentence anyone has ever delivered while refusing to touch me. I laughed softly. She did too, and the tension loosened without disappearing. That evening we sat together on the couch, closer than before but still careful. No declarations. No promises. Just 2 women listening to an old soul record while snow gathered outside. Then Rachel rested her head lightly against my shoulder. I stayed perfectly still for a moment before allowing myself to breathe. Tomorrow I would let another team take her away. Tonight, for the first time, I understood that protecting Rachel might require me to honor the boundary between us, even when every part of me wished the clock would stop. Morning arrived without ceremony. No dramatic storm. No final warning. Just pale winter light spreading across the cabin floor while Rachel's suitcase waited beside the door. I had spent 23 years making transfers feel routine. Verify the receiving team. Confirm identification. Exchange necessary information. Leave. That morning every familiar step felt strangely personal. Rachel drank coffee from the mug she had claimed on our first day there. "You made this too strong," she said. "You complained yesterday that it was weak. I contain contradictions." I noticed. She smiled, but neither of us could hold it for long. At 8:20, headlights appeared beyond the trees. My body reacted before my heart did. I checked the vehicle, confirmed the officers, reviewed their credentials, and spoke privately with the senior agent. Everything was correct. Everything was safe. I hated that everything was safe. Rachel came outside wearing her gray coat, the same one she had worn when we first met. Somehow that made the weeks between then and now collapse into seconds. One of the agents carried her suitcase to the vehicle, giving us a little distance without being asked. Rachel looked at me. "So this is where Emily Carter goes on without you. It is where you go somewhere safe." Still accurate instead of honest. I almost laughed. "You really do notice everything. Only the important things." The cold air caught between us. I wanted to tell her not to go. I wanted to say that I had spent years convincing myself solitude was independence, and she had unsettled that belief with black coffee, bad dancing, and questions I could not answer. But she was still transferring out of my protection. She deserved a choice untouched by obligation. "Rachel," I said, "when you get there, build something that belongs to you. Not to Emily. Not to the people who made you leave. You." Her eyes shone. "And what are you going to build?" That question reached somewhere deeper than I expected. "I do not know yet." I paused. "But I think I am finally tired of hiding inside my work." Rachel stepped closer. For one suspended moment I thought she might kiss me. She did not. Instead she took my hand. Warm fingers. Gentle pressure. Nothing that demanded an answer. "Goodbye, Claire." "Goodbye, Rachel." She released me and got into the vehicle. I watched until the taillights disappeared beyond the trees. Then I returned to the cabin. Her mug was still beside the sink. The record from the night before remained on the turntable. I stood there expecting professional relief. What came instead was grief, quiet and unmistakable. 6 days later, Washington called. The compromised access had been contained, and the investigation tied it to an attempt to locate records connected to Rachel's financial evidence. No protected location had been exposed. The case was stable. Rachel was safe. My assignment was officially closed. Then my supervisor said something I had not expected. Rachel had asked whether, once all professional restrictions were cleared, she would ever be permitted to contact me. I sat very still. "What did you tell her?" "That decision would be yours." For 23 years I had known exactly what to do when someone needed protection. I had never learned what to do when the danger was gone and the person still mattered. I looked at the empty coffee mug on my desk and realized Rachel had left me one final question. Without the assignment between us, would I finally choose to find her? For 3 days I did nothing. I told myself I was respecting procedure, although the procedure had already ended. Then I told myself Rachel needed time to become whoever she wanted to be. That was partly true. The harder truth was simpler. For 23 years my job had trained me to move people out of danger and then walk away. Nobody had trained me to walk toward someone once she was safe. 6 weeks later I stood across from a small white house in Vermont, watching warm light spill from Rachel's kitchen window. That was the moment I had remembered at the beginning. There was no badge on my belt, no government vehicle, no assignment waiting in a folder. I had confirmed through the proper channels that contact was permitted, and Rachel had chosen to let me know where she could be reached. Everything after that belonged to us. I crossed the street. Halfway to the porch, the door opened. Rachel stood there in jeans and a green sweater, staring at me as if she had imagined this scene often enough to distrust it. "You took your time," she said. "I wanted to be certain." Her mouth curved slightly. Still hiding inside certainty? Trying not to. That changed her expression. I stopped at the bottom step. "I need to tell you something before I come any closer." Rachel waited. I spent weeks wondering whether what happened between us was circumstance, fear, proximity, your dependence on me. I swallowed. "Then the circumstances ended, and I missed you more, not less." Rachel's eyes filled. "Claire, I am finished protecting you." I managed a small smile. "Professionally." She laughed through the tears gathering in her eyes. "Good clarification." But I would like to know you when neither of us owes the other anything. Rachel came down one step. And what exactly are you asking? There had been a time when I could face complicated situations without hesitation, yet that simple question made my hands tremble. Dinner. Dinner. I thought starting with forever might seem excessive. She laughed again, softer this time. Dinner sounds reasonable. I was afraid you might say no. I considered it. Rachel. For approximately 2 seconds. Then she stepped close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath in the winter air. She did not assume. Neither did I. May I kiss you? She asked. The question mattered more than I can explain. I nodded. Yes. The kiss was gentle and brief, less like losing control than finally setting something down. When we separated, my forehead rested lightly against hers, and I realized I was smiling. Still think good company is not in your job description? She whispered. I may need to revise the description. Rachel took my hand and led me toward the open door. Years later, when people asked when my life changed, I never thought of danger or false names. I thought of that doorway. I had spent half my life believing safety meant controlling every possible loss. Rachel taught me something quieter. Sometimes healing begins when you stop treating love like another risk to manage. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who might need a reminder that it is never too late to choose a life that feels true.